So the idea is we're going to use operant conditioning in our classroom all the time. I mean, think about it. We do that as teachers with almost every class. You know, students are acting in good behavior. We say things like, "Oh, I love the way that Jimmy is behaving," or "I love the way that Mary did this," or they give them a little candy bar, or they give them praise, or we say to the kids that if they all get their work done, we can all go outside for an early recess. And we use reinforcers all the time with the hopes of change in behavior, of increase in behavior, right? And the idea is, how do we use this in our classroom? All right. And you'll notice in that PowerPoint, I have conditions for operant conditioning to occur. There's 3 conditions. First and foremost is the individual must make a response. In order for learning to take place from a behavior standpoint, there's a stimulus and a response. In order for me, and in this situation, raising your hand might be one, okay? By raising your hand, that's the response. You have to make it in order for it to, for the conditioning to operant conditioning to take place. Because if this doesn't happen and you sit there, how do I call on you? You need to do this. I see you. You've got my attention. I give it to you, and then you respond. So the idea is individuals need to make a response. And if you like the reinforcement, teacher praise, teacher attention in this situation, they do it more often. Students that start talking without raising their hand, just blurting out answers, the teachers will oftentimes just ignore them. Why? They ignore them because they're hoping it will go away. That if I don't reinforce that behavior, they won't continue doing that behavior. Okay? So the idea is we use operant conditioning all the time in our classroom, but the students must make a response. Secondly, is we want the reinforcement to follow shortly after the response. The sooner you can reinforce the behavior, the better. Because if we delay the response, we delay the reinforcer, a lot of stuff can happen in between then where we forget what they're reinforcing. Think about this for a second. You're in the middle of a class, you're doing something, you see a student help another student, they don't disrupt the class, they get them back on track, they assist them, I can keep teaching, I'm not interrupted, the class is not interrupted, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, if only all my students would do that, if they would just all be so helpful without disrupting the class. And I'm going to tell them that I appreciate how they assisted me in the class. But I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to do it in a little while because I don't want to disrupt the class. So a long stretch of time goes on between that action and my reinforcement. And 3 hours later, I say, hey, thank you earlier for what you did with so-and-so. And the student will look at you sometimes like, what did I do? They don't even remember. They don't remember. They can't make the connection. And that what happens is the sooner that I can make the connection, reinforce them for their behavior, they make that strong, it's called strength of association. A strong association is made between my reinforcement and their behavior. And the light bulb goes on. Aha, this is what the teacher likes us to do. Delay the reinforcement, they can still learn, but by make that strength of the association really close, really quick, it's going to be much more easily remembered going forward. So we like for the students to be reinforced as appropriately, as quickly as possible, so we strengthen the association between their behavior and what they'll get for reinforcement. Third idea for operant conditioning to occur is reinforcer should be presented only when the response has occurred. If you want the behavior to be truly reinforced, make that connection, last for a long time, it has to be earned. I always say, teachers ask students to hand in papers, and they say things like, you'll be graded not only on content, but also on grammar and all that stuff, right? Well, what happens to the student who waits to the last minute? Cranks out an essay the morning of, it's 2 pages long, it's got typos, grammatical errors, mistakes, etc. And the teacher passes everybody's papers back, and the student who had a bunch of mistakes on it still gets an A. And they're thinking to themselves, oh, great. Okay. Then you have another student here who spent a week ahead of time getting it all done, proofreading it, having someone else look at it. They get a really good grade on their paper, and it's well deserved because they worked hard and met all the criteria. And the question is, how does that grade, which is the reinforcer, change the behavior? Well, ideally, the student who worked real hard on it, they'll make a connection. Hard work, good grade. Keep doing the same thing. Do it the same time, same way next time. Unfortunately, the student who waits to the last minute and gets a really good grade and has typos, grammatical errors, etc., what are they learning? Okay? In that situation, what we're doing is we're actually positively reinforcing bad behavior. We're reinforcing typos, grammatical errors, procrastination, all that stuff. And their behavior is very unlikely to change. So the idea is, by point number 3, is we want to reinforce the behavior once the response has occurred. Grades are a reinforcer. They should be contingent upon the appropriate response, appropriate behavior, etc. Okay? And we do that all the time in our classrooms. If we give away grades or false praise for behaviors, etc., pretty soon we find that that reinforcement's not working as effectively as we would like. Now you'll notice that I use the word reinforcer. What's another common term that teachers will call it? We give them not reinforcers, we give them rewards. Okay? Now, I don't use the word reward. I know what you mean by saying students get rewards, candy, praise. I get it. But think about it for a minute. What is the connotation associated with the word reward? What does that mean? You get a reward. Has a teacher ever promised rewards for everybody, and then when you get them, you're like, oh my God, these suck. This is no good. These suck. No, because reward implies that everybody's going to like it. And if you're all going to like it, that's what reward implies. But if you're passing out Garfield pencils as your reward, and you're in high school, some kids are going to look at the Garfield pencil and say, it's not even a mechanical pencil. I could care less. Chuck it, throw it away. Some kids might like it. They laugh, think it's funny. They like it, The idea is I want to change behavior. I want to shape behavior. How do I do that? I find a reinforcer that works for my students, and when they've exhibited a particular behavior, I reinforce it by giving them that desired pencil, that desired activity, that desired candy bar, whatever you use, praise, whatever it might be, right? So we have to think about how we use these terms. I want to use the term reinforcer because we're going to find that reinforcers have very specific meanings, okay? Reinforcement means simply to increase a behavior. I use reinforcers to increase behavior. I use punishment to decrease behavior. Punishment to decrease, reinforcement to increase. So they have very specific meanings. Reinforcement is giving them something after they have demonstrated the appropriate response. And you'll notice that in that slide, in the next table, I have reinforcement and punishment. You'll notice it kind of breaks them down according to how we use that term. Now, there's a slight variation between what the book says and what I have in the table, and I'll explain why. Okay, so we use the term reinforcement. You've often heard positive reinforcement. People love positive reinforcement. Praise. Think about what you use as positive reinforcement. Praise, candy, activities, going outside early, any number of different things. And as a teacher, you have to start thinking about the types of ones that you rely on. If you always rely on candy, you might find that pretty soon kids give up on candy or they start getting really bad teeth and it costs you money. So you have to start thinking about different strategies for reinforcing behavior. And what you find is with food works for all kids, right? All K through college. But what you're going to find is as the kids get older, they still want reinforcement just as much as the kid that's in second grade. High schoolers just want something different. They want things like time to sit with their friends at the end of class, being able to get on their phones, playing on the computer, going outside, listening to music, any number of activities, right? Those are still kind of incentives, things that the kids want, but they're not the same as candy, recess, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is they're to increase the behavior. Positive reinforcement, you look at the table, what does it mean? Positive reinforcement. A positive stimulus is presented to the student to increase behavior. Contrast that with negative reinforcement. The goal is still the same, to increase the behavior, but it's done differently. With negative reinforcement, you'll notice that it is a negative stimulus that is withdrawn to increase behavior. For example, you ever get into your car, start your car, and all you hear is ding, 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 ding. Oh my God, so annoying. What do? Put your seatbelt on. Why? Get rid of that sound, right? Leave your keys in the ignition. You open the door, you're ding, 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 ding. They're like, the car companies are telling you, take the keys, turn off the headlights, put your seatbelt on. They're doing these annoying things for you to stop. Believe it or not, some students, they get a homework assignment and they go home the first night that they got it, maybe it's a paper, and they start working on it. I know, you guys are rolling your eyes. Truth is, some kids do. Why do they do that? Because they feel that the assignment is like a weight on their shoulder, and in order to get that annoying, nagging task off of their shoulders, the anxiety associated with it, that if they get the introduction done on the first night, they feel better. So they're relieving themselves of that anxiety by starting earlier. Okay, that's reinforcement. Goal is to increase behavior. Now, punishment is to decrease behavior. And we go a couple different ways of doing that. Now, in the book, they'll talk about positive punishment, negative punishment. They're just trying to tell you whether or not something is how the stimulus is taken or withdrawn. I don't like positive punishment. It almost seems like it's an oxymoron there. But the idea with positive punishment, we refer to that as punishment one. It is going to be a negative stimulus that is presented to the student with the goal of decreasing or weakening behavior. Think about that. Something negative presented to the students. What is that? Screaming at the kids, corporal punishment. You know what? Leave the corporal punishment to the parents if they choose to do that. Our job is trying to develop rapport with our students, not trying to build barriers, right? So punishment one, we'll leave that to somebody else. We will use punishment two in our classrooms. Okay? What is punishment two? Punishment two is a positive stimulus is taken away or withdrawn from the student to decrease behavior. For example, loss of recess, detention after school, take the car keys away, take their phone away, participation in extracurricular activities, any number of things where something that they enjoy is taken away from them with the goal of decreasing a particular behavior. Now, when you think about these two in totality, is teachers will rely on both positive or will rely on punishment and reinforcement. But Skinner was very clear. We want to use reinforcement first and foremost as opposed to punishment. And for two particular reasons. One is it just feels better. It feels better to be reinforced than it does to be punished. If you're punished, you start to doubt yourself, you feel bad, you have bad rapport with the teacher. It just doesn't feel good. Secondly is when you punish a student, think about how oftentimes teachers or parents are people that punish. They say things like, quit that, don't do that, stop that, I don't like that, you're in trouble, go to this, blah, blah, blah. It's always like that. What are they failing to do? They're failing to communicate what their expectations are, what they want them to do. What does reinforcement do? It communicates, I like what you're doing. Praise associated with the behavior. Oh, good job. You've already started your task. Oh, thank you for getting that done early. Oh, I love that. Reinforcement feels better and it communicates the expectations. You're doing the right thing. Okay?